Once upon a time, in a far-off land, I was kidnapped by a gang of fearless yet terrified young men with so much impossible hope beating inside their bodies it burned their very skin and strengthened their will right through their bones. They held me captive for 13 days. They wanted to break me. It was not personal. I was not broken. This is what I tell myself. It was hot, nearly 100 degrees. The air so thick it felt like warm rain. I dressed my son, Christophe, in a pair of miniature red board shorts and a light blue t-shirt with a sailboat across the front. I covered his smooth brown arms and his beaming face with sunscreen. I kissed his nose and brushed his thick, dirty blonde curls away from his face as he pressed his palms against my cheeks and shouted, "Mama, Mama, Mama." My husband, Michael, the baby, and I said goodbye to my parents, told them we would be back in time for dinner. Michael and I were taking Christophe to the ocean for the first time. We were going to hold him in the warm, salt water as he wiggled his toes and kicked his chubby legs. We were going to throw him toward the sun and catch him safely in our arms. My mother smiled from the balcony where she watered her plants, wearing a crisp linen outfit and high heels. She blew a kiss to her grandson. She reminded us to be safe. We put our son into his car seat. We handed him his favorite stuffed animal, a little bulldog named Baba. He clenched his beloved toy tightly in his little fist, still smiling. He has his father's temperament. He's usually happy. That is important to me. Before getting into the car, Michael double-checked that Christophe was strapped securely in his car seat. He put our beach bags into the trunk. Michael held my door open. When he closed it, he pressed his face against the window and blew air until his cheeks filled. I laughed and pressed my hand against his face through the glass. "I love you," I mouthed. I don't say those words often, but he knows. Michael ran around to his side of the car. After he slid behind the steering wheel and adjusted the rearview mirror so he could see the baby, he leaned into me and we kissed. He rested an arm on the armrest between us, and I idly brushed the golden wisps of hair on his arms. I smiled and rested my head on his shoulder. We drove down the long, steep hill of my parents' driveway and waited quietly for the heavy steel gates, the gates keeping us safe, to open. In the back seat, Christophe cooed softly, still smiling. As the gates closed behind us, 3 black Land Cruisers surrounded our car. The air filled with a high-pitched squealing and the smell of burning rubber. Michael's tanned knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel and looked frantically for a way out. His body shook. The doors of all 3 trucks opened at the same time, and men we did not know spilled out, all limbs and gunmetal. There was silence, the air thin, still hot. My breath caught painfully in my ribcage. There was shouting. 2 men stood behind our car, machine guns raised. Michael pressed his foot against the gas pedal to move forward, but a tall man with a red bandana across the lower half of his face, a man holding a machine gun, pounded his fist on the hood of the car. He left a small dent in the shape of his closed hand. He glared at us, then raised his gun, pointed it directly at Michael's chest. I threw my arm across Michael's body. It was a silly, impotent gesture. Michael's eyes were bright. The arcs of tears trembled along his lower eyelids. He grabbed my hand between both of his, held me so fiercely it felt like all those slender bones would be crushed. 2 men slammed the butt of their rifles against the car windows. Their bodies glowed with anger. The glass cracked, fractures spreading. Michael and I pulled apart, waited tensely, and then the windshield broke, the sound loud and echoing. We covered our faces as shards of glass shattered around us, refracting sharp prisms of light. Michael and I reached for Christophe at the same time. The baby was still smiling, but his lips quivered, his eyes wide. My hands could not quite reach him.